Well, it looks like today's lecture is on stairs. Hi, I'm Andy Campbell from Longwood University's theater program. Today we're going to talk about several different ways to make stairs for theater. Here, we have a little tiny town staircase. And it's very typical about how we build things in theater, and especially how we build stairs at Longwood. Every staircase, no matter how we build it, is going to have the same 3 or 4 pieces to it. The main piece is here on the sides. This piece is called the carriage. We have the part that you step on. That's called the tread. This piece here that goes from the tread to tread and the floor to this tread, this is called the riser or rise. In the back of the stair, we have a couple pieces in here that a lot of people call stretchers. Here at Longwood, we build a lot of the stairs out of plywood. We choose plywood because it's strong, it's relatively affordable, it's flat, and it's consistent. At Longwood, we build everything out of BC ply. So that one side is B, which is fairly sanded very well, and the other side is C, which will have a couple more defects, like this right here is the back side here. This is a C side, so it's not quite as smooth. But for stairs, especially something like this, which might be a set of escape steps are stairs that aren't scenery but are used to get off the stage. So backstage, we might paint this black, and the quality of this plywood doesn't really matter too much. All right, so when we're building stairs, there's a magic number, and that magic number is 18. So what does that magic number relate to? That magic number relates to the rise and the run. If they can wind up to be as close to 18 as possible, that makes a very comfortable staircase to walk on. Here at Longwood and a lot of places, we have a lot of stock platforms and a lot of stock stairs here at Longwood. And to keep everything consistent and interchangeable, we make all our rises 8 inches and we make all our runs 12 inches. So I come up with 20, a little bit over magic number, but it's still a very consistent step when you walk up. It'd be very comfortable. For example, if you went to something like 9 by 9, still 18, works up to 18, that's going to be a much steeper angle, and the tread isn't going to be quite big enough for a lot of people's feet. On the opposite end of that, if you went to, let's say, 3 and 15, that's going to be a real shallow set of steps, and they may be uncomfortable for people to walk up and down. All right, so let's look at how we're going to talk about a little bit about how I constructed this and how you would go about laying this out. How I did this platform here, or this step, is I cut out the carriage into actually to be a rectangle first. So the finished height of this is 16, and the finished depth of this is 24, 2 feet. So on my table saw, I cut a rectangle of plywood that was 23 1/4 by 15 1/4. All right, by the time we add the extra, the rise on the front and the top tread, that brings me up to 8 by 24. And then what I did was I marked out where to cut this out, and I cut that out on the table saw. If you don't have a table saw, you could use a circular saw, you could use a jigsaw, you could even use a bandsaw if that's all you have. And so when you cut this out, you want to have, so let's start here at the bottom. So the bottom, so I'm going to, this carriage here, the part of the bottom, even though my finished height is 8, I'm only going to cut this to 7 1/4. I'm also going to cut from here to here to be 12. And the top part here to here, I'm actually going to cut this 11 1/4. So by the time I add on my rise here, I'm up to 12. And then when I put this rise on here, then that leaves this distance here to be 12 inches. The process, after I cut that piece together, so I took my carriage and I glued and stapled this whole frame, this whole entire staircase together. So I start when I build these, so I get my carriage, and I am going to have my tread right here. And so you're always going to start with your treads. So I glued and stapled, boom, boom, boom. Then I went on the other side and I stapled the other the rise to the other carriage. After I did that, I went to the second step here and I put the second rise in. Same thing. When I started here with a pneumatic stapler, I start down here at the bottom and I actually work my way up. Here I'd start at the bottom, I work my way up because I want to make sure that the carriage isn't wonky like this. You know, I want to make sure she's straight up and down. After I do that, I'm going to start with my bottom tread. And for my bottom tread, actually I glue it because we're using pneumatic staples here. So anytime you're using pneumatics, you're going to be using glue. And so I put glue on the carriage, I put glue on the front riser, and I put glue on the back of this tread. I pushed it up against this riser, and then I put these two staples in first, and I worked my way out one side and around. I'm start here and here and here because I want to make sure that this piece right here, that this tread is really touching this riser up here. After that, I went and I did the same thing on the top here. I put some glue on, I put down my tread, I started up here in the front corner, and I worked my way across, and then I went here to the side, and I went down here to the side as well. At that time, I'm going to turn around my whole entire staircase. Let's see if we get a good shot. There you go. So at that time, I am going to flip this guy over, and I'm going to staple here from the back of the riser into the tread. A couple staples in, boom, 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 and that's pretty good. All right, after that, I went in, I added this stretcher on the back, and I added this stretcher in the bottom, which is actually a piece of, 2 pieces of plywood. Let's see if we can get that in there. There we go. So it's actually hog trough. All right, why hog trough? Why couldn't I just put a piece on the bottom or a piece here on the side, vertical piece? Well, putting the hog trough makes this corner really strong. It also, when I go to screw this down, this hog trough on the bottom here, I can put a couple screws into my stage floor and my staircase won't go anywhere. Something that I like to do a lot is, if you can see here, there's only a little bit of the carriage that touches the deck, or the desk right now, which is like the stage floor. So there's a little bit here and a little bit here. This whole entire middle section of the carriage is up off the floor about 3/16 of an inch. So why do you think I might want to do that? Well, it's going to give us one advantage. When we go to install this stair. A lot of stage floors, they're a little wiggly giggly. Sometimes they've been painted over 10 times, so there might be some little blobs of paint all the way around. Maybe the masonite on the deck doesn't quite line up. And by cutting out this little spot here, it allows me to have the staircase less of a footprint on the deck, and it'll be more stable. All right, so how did I do that? That's actually really easy to do. All right, so let's say this is my carriage here. I took the router, and on this router there's a flush trim bit, and the flush trim bit has a little bearing here that won't allow it to cut more than the diameter of the bit. And let's say we're going to pretend that the table here, this is my carriage. And I usually mark, let's say, I like to do 4 inches, so I will mark 4 inches and 4 inches. I would place it on the work table, like one of the shop tables, and I would overhang it 3/16 of an inch, clamp it to the table. Then I can take my router and push it in, and as I cut across, the bearing will ride up against the work table, and it'll only allow, then it'll cut this little shape out. Okay. After we do that, there's a couple other finishing steps that we do. Here at Longwood, whenever we're done a staircase or actually any flat or any other piece of scenery, we immediately sand it with a random orbit sander with some 120 grit sandpaper to buff it down. We're going to try not to get any splinters in anybody's hands. And so we'll sand all this smooth. Maybe if there's a little discrepancy, it's okay. Sanding solves all sins. What you can also do is if you're going to do something, you could change with the same tool, the router. You could put this little router bit in here, which is a roundover in it. And that roundover bit will put a nice radius on the edge of the steps. That's pretty helpful, so that when people are carrying the stairs, there aren't any sharp edges. There aren't any sharp edges that maybe a costume could get caught on, or that if it bumps into a piece of scenery, if it's a real like straight edge here, maybe that might splinter off, and then splinters are just beginning of problems. So here at Longwood, we'll either round over them, okay, if it needs to, or we're gonna actually just sand the whole entire thing smooth with some 120. If we want if the plywood's really rough, we might even use a piece of 80 grit sandpaper. But we want to have a staircase, including the inside. So all these pieces in here, we sand both sides of them, because someone's going to grab this staircase, pick it up. Someone's going to grab this on the other side, and we don't want anybody to get hurt during the show. Okay, so we typically build stairs like this plywood construction, anything that is maybe it's in depth, maybe only four stairs, so maybe we might go up to 18 to 36 inches or so with some stairs. Let's talk about width. Well, we only go up to that about 36 inches because it makes it a little bit difficult to store anything larger than that. Like most theaters, Longwood is in a little bit short of storage space. All right, let's talk about width of stairs. So this stair, I made this, and he's only 16 inches wide right now. It's just a little demo for class. So this guy has 2 carriages on it. There is a rule here that we use at Longwood and the most theaters use. Once it gets past 3 feet, 36 inches, you're going to need to add a center stringer or carriage, center stringer or carriage, usually interchangeable term. And so that's 3 feet is about your cutoff point. All right. All right, so next is another type of stairs sometimes you have. Maybe you've got, ooh, I'm all dirty. Maybe if you got some other types of stairs, if there's a longer run. So this is the run of the stairs for here. Maybe if you had to go 6, 8 feet, or even if the long run of stairs like in your house, there's a different way that we can make them. All right, so other kind of carriages. So this is just a piece of 1x. At Longwood, we're going to build a carriage out there. We're not going to build it out of 1x. We're going to build it out of 3/4 inch plywood. 3/4 inch plywood is much stronger than this, but for the demonstration purpose in this class, I'm using a piece of 1x. I would not recommend 1x if you were going to build something that was maybe more than 2 or 3 steps. All right, so here's another kind of carriage. All right, so I've cut this out of a piece of 1x12, 3/4 of an inch by 11 1/4 inches. And I've actually so I laid all this out, and I've actually cut this out all on my miter box. If you don't have a miter box that can swing to wide angles, you can also cut this out with a circular saw. You can cut it out with a band saw. Even a jigsaw would work. All right, so let's look at what we're going to do here. So if I wanted to lay this out here, this right here, this staircase, this carriage, just like this carriage here, this is an open carriage staircase. So with the carriage right here, the steps are cut out. The other type of carriage is a closed carriage staircase. So here, all right, so here is, I've laid this out, and I'll show you how I laid this out for, help if I turn it right side up. All right, so here is a carriage for a closed carriage that I've laid out on this piece of 1x as well. So it's closed because this part right here for the stairs, we're not going to cut this out. Closed carriages are generally stronger than open carriages because there's so much more material here to help support the staircase. Again, this is also made out of pine. However, we usually make things here at Longwood out of BC fir plywood. So let me show you how I laid this closed carriage out, and then we'll talk about how you get from a closed carriage to an open carriage. Okay, to lay out stairs, you're going to need a couple things. One, you're going to need a carpenter's framing square. Almost every shop has one of these. You're also going to need some stair layout tools. They're not necessary or critical, but they make your life 10,000 times more fun if you use these guys. All right, so I'll show you. So how do we use these little guys? They cost about $6. These should be in every carpenter's toolbox. All right, so let's say I'm going to do this 8 and 12. So I take the little layout tool. Screw one down at 8 inches. And the other one at 12. So now I've set up my rise and my run. How does that translate onto the piece of scenery? Okay. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to start over here, and now this automatically sets the angle so I can trace my angle. Then I can move it down and I can do it again. So there you can see that what I've just laid out here. If I'm going to lay out a top tread, I can't do that. All right, so that's good for the stairs. But what I'm going to do now is I want to draw a line for the rest. So I'm just going to take another framing square. So now I've transferred all my marks onto the carriage. You can see this is the bottom step, and 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Now, if you were going to use, make this an open carriage, you would take this out and you would cut this out now. If you're going to make it a closed carriage, you're going to have to find a way to get the treads in here somehow. And so you can't just put, so here's our little doodad. You just can't put the tread in here. Let's see how that's going to work. So you just can't put the tread in here and screw it in from the outside. That's not good. This wood is going to fail in this direction. What you need to do is you need to put a cleat. This is another piece of pine that I glued and stapled to the carriage. And this cleat then will come and we'll take and we'll put the stair. Let's see what's the best way to do that. We'll come and we'll put this. Whoa, this is better. Look, I'm going to put the stair on top of the tread. All right, and then I'm going to glue and I'm going to staple in the stairs down to the cleat. If you're going to go to an open carriage, traditionally you'll have the tread just on top of the carriage, and you'll glue and screw that in. One thing you'll have to do if you do this, especially short, you see how this wants to wiggle back and forth. So to prevent that, you'll probably want to put a couple stringers in, just like in the back of this staircase here. But the same thing, we're going to glue and staple, or we're going to glue and screw in. Since I make everything here at Longwood, and commercially most people out there make everything out of plywood, we're usually going to glue and staple everything together. All right, next, let's talk about two more things. So let's talk about this right here on this staircase. This is a closed riser. If you wanted to have this, some designers like to have this space open, so then that will be an open riser. Next, there's two types of staircases. We've got two types of carriages, open and closed, and there's two types of staircases. There's dependent, and then there's independent. This staircase that I have right here, this is independent. I can just walk out there on stage, plop it down, tag them to the ground with a couple screws, and it's all fine. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't need anything to help stand it up. So it's independent. If you were to build a staircase with this kind of carriage, you're going to need some kind of leg in the back. So it's dependent on a leg. Or let's say if it butts up against a piece of scenery, maybe you had a platform where this butts up against, and then you bolted the staircase to the platform, then it's dependent. So it's dependent on on something else to make it stand up. Okay, I think that's all I have today about stairs. My name's Andy Campbell from Longwood University Theater Program. If you have any questions, you can email me at Campbella, CAMPBELLA, @longwood.edu. Thank you and have a good day.